He clinked his fork against the crystal glass 3 times, and every head in that banquet hall turned toward him. 200 faces, white tablecloths, chandeliers dripping light across the ceiling like frozen rain. My son had just received his medical degree, and his father-in-law was about to destroy the proudest night of my life. Except he didn't know what I carried in my purse. A single photograph that would bring his entire empire crashing down before dessert was served. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Maggie Dawson. Most people in Cedar Falls, Tennessee call me Maggie. For 25 years, I worked the night shift at St. Andrews Regional Hospital, checking vitals at 2 in the morning, holding the hands of patients too afraid to sleep, mopping floors when the custodial staff called in sick, because that's what you did in a small-town hospital. You filled whatever gap needed filling. I raised my son alone. His father, my husband James, was a paramedic, the best one in Hamilton County. He could start an IV in a moving ambulance on a dirt road in the dark. He had steady hands and a voice that made scared people calm. On August 14th, 26 years ago, he responded to a call at Whitfield Memorial Hospital, the big private facility on the hill, owned by Dr. Richard Ashford. Gas leak in the basement near the boiler room. James went in because 2 maintenance workers were still down there, unconscious from the fumes. He got them both out, carried the second one over his shoulder up 2 flights of stairs. Then he went back in because someone on the radio said there might be a third. There wasn't. The information was wrong. By the time they realized the error, the corridor had collapsed. Structural damage from the gas leak had weakened the old support beams. James was 31 years old. I was 34, 5 months pregnant with our son. The official report called it a tragic accident, aging infrastructure, unavoidable deterioration. They gave me a folded flag and a check for $50,000 and told me James was a hero. He was a hero. But it wasn't unavoidable. 3 weeks after the funeral, a woman named Doris Painter knocked on my door. She'd worked in building maintenance at Whitfield for 11 years. Her hands shook when she handed me a manila envelope. Inside was a copy of an inspection report from 6 months before the accident. The basement infrastructure had been flagged as critical. The support beams needed immediate replacement. Estimated cost, $420,000. Someone had written across the top in red ink, deferred to next fiscal year. R. Ashford. Dr. Richard Ashford, chief administrator and majority owner of Whitfield Memorial Hospital, had looked at a report that said people could die and decided it was too expensive to fix right now. I sat at my kitchen table that night holding the document in one hand and my husband's wristwatch in the other. The watch had survived the collapse. The paramedics found it on his wrist when they pulled him out, still ticking. The glass was cracked, but the hands kept moving. I wound it every morning for 26 years. It became the first thing I touched each day and the last thing I set down at night. I kept the document. I kept the watch. And I kept going. Raising a child alone on a night shift nurse's salary in Cedar Falls meant learning the art of creative survival. I clipped coupons with surgical precision. I bought my son's school clothes at the church thrift store and told him vintage was cool before vintage was cool. Every spare dollar went into a coffee can on top of the refrigerator, marked with masking tape that said Nathan's future. My son was quiet as a boy. Serious. He'd sit at the kitchen table doing homework while I got ready for my shift, and sometimes he'd look up and say, "Mom, be careful tonight." 8 years old, worrying about me the way I worried about him. That's what losing a parent does to a child. It teaches them that people can disappear and never come back. He asked about his father once when he was 10. We were walking home from the library, and he stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. "Mom, was Dad scared when he went back in?" "Probably." "Then why did he go?" "Because 2 people were alive because of him, and he thought there might be a third." My son stared at me with those dark eyes, James's eyes, and said, "I want to help people like that." I took his hand and we kept walking. I didn't tell him that his father died because a rich man decided a building inspection could wait. I wasn't ready. He wasn't ready. And honestly, I didn't know what to do with the truth yet. I just knew I had to keep it safe until the right moment came. The years passed the way they do when you're too busy to notice. My son was 14 when he told me he wanted to be a doctor, 17 when he got early acceptance to the University of Tennessee, 22 when he started medical school. Each milestone was a small miracle built on night shifts and prayer, and that coffee can that never seemed to fill fast enough. I picked up extra shifts whenever I could. Holidays, weekends, the graveyard hours nobody wanted. My back ached, my feet swelled. Some mornings I'd get home at 7 and sit in the driveway for 10 minutes because I was too tired to walk to the front door. But then I'd look at the kitchen window where my son used to do his homework, and I'd remember why I was doing this. Medical school was 4 years of financial terror. Tuition, textbooks, housing, board exams. I took out a second mortgage on the house, sold the car James had been restoring in the garage, and bought a 12-year-old Honda that burned oil but ran. My son called every Sunday. He'd tell me about anatomy lab, about the patients he was starting to see in clinical rotations, about the professor who told him he had a gift for listening. "You got that from your father," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "I got it from both of you." In his 3rd year, he called with a different kind of news. He'd met someone, a girl named Emily. She was studying pediatrics. "Smart," he said. "Kind. The kind of kind that's real. Not performed." I could hear it in his voice. The same breathless certainty I'd heard in James's voice 30 years ago when he told his mother he'd found the one. "She's wonderful, Mom. I can't wait for you to meet her." I met Emily at Thanksgiving. She arrived at my kitchen door carrying a homemade pecan pie and wearing a sweater with a hole in the elbow. She hugged me like she'd known me forever. Within an hour, she was helping me wash dishes and telling me about her childhood in Knoxville, her 2 younger sisters, her dream of opening a children's clinic in a rural community. I loved her immediately. It wasn't until Christmas that I learned her last name was Ashford. My son mentioned it casually, hanging ornaments on the tree we'd bought from the lot behind the Baptist church. Emily's dad wants to host a dinner when I graduate. He's got connections at Whitfield Memorial. Thinks he might be able to help me with a residency placement. I set the ornament down carefully. "Whitfield Memorial?" "Yeah, her father basically runs the place, Dr. Richard Ashford. Emily says he's old school, kind of intense, but he's been really welcoming." The room tilted. I gripped the back of the couch and smiled and said, "That's wonderful, baby." After he went to bed, I sat in the kitchen with the cracked watch on the table and the manila envelope from 26 years ago and tried to breathe. My son was in love with the daughter of the man who killed his father. I spent 3 months investigating before I said a word. I'm a nurse, not a detective, but 25 years in a hospital teaches you how to find things that people try to hide. I pulled public records on Whitfield Memorial. Inspection histories, OSHA complaints, incident reports. What I found made me sick. The basement where James died had been quietly repaired 6 months after the accident. No public notice, no acknowledgement that the original inspection had flagged the danger. The repair invoice was buried in a fiscal year report I found at the county clerk's office. But that wasn't the worst part. In the years since James's death, Whitfield had accumulated 14 safety violations. Electrical systems in the East Wing, fire suppression failures in the surgical suite, mold in the pediatric ward. Each time, the same pattern: flag the problem, defer the repair, cover the paper trail, and 18 months ago, a patient named Dorothy Chen had died during a routine procedure. The official cause was cardiac arrest. But a former surgical nurse named Linda Voss had filed a complaint claiming that the anesthesia monitoring equipment in operating room 3 had been malfunctioning for weeks. Staff had reported it. Administration had scheduled a replacement and then canceled it due to budget concerns. Dorothy Chen was 67. She had 3 grandchildren. She went in for a knee replacement and never woke up. I found Linda Voss working at a clinic in Chattanooga. She'd been fired from Whitfield 2 weeks after filing her complaint. When I showed up at her door, she started crying before I finished introducing myself. "I knew someone would come eventually," she said. "I just didn't think it would take this long." She gave me everything: internal emails, equipment logs, the original maintenance request for the anesthesia monitor, stamped denied with Dr. Ashford's authorization code, and a single photograph of the equipment log from OR 3 on the day Dorothy Chen died, showing the malfunction warning that had been overridden by a supervisor on Ashford's direct order. That photograph went into my purse, and it stayed there. 6 weeks before graduation, I tried to tell my son. We were sitting on the porch after dinner, fireflies blinking in the yard. He was talking about the residency, about Emily, about the house they wanted to rent near the hospital. I need to tell you something about Whitfield Memorial, I said. He looked at me, waited. About your father, I said, about how he really died. I told him everything. The deferred inspection, the red ink note, the pattern of violations, Dorothy Chen, the photograph. I told him that the man who wanted to host his graduation dinner was the same man whose decision had sent his father into a building that should have been closed. My son sat very still for a long time. The fireflies kept blinking. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked. Then he said, "Does Emily know?" "No." He looked at me, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but a kind of grief that hardens into resolve. The same expression James used to get when he was about to do something difficult and right. "We tell her together," he said. "She deserves to know who her father is." We told Emily the next evening. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where my son had done his homework, where I'd read the inspection report 26 years ago and listened without interrupting. When I showed her the photograph, she closed her eyes. "I confronted him about Dorothy Chen," she whispered. "Last year. He told me it was a baseless accusation from a disgruntled employee. He said the family settled and the matter was closed." She opened her eyes and looked at my son. I believed him. "I'm so sorry. I believed my own father." My son took her hand. "That's what he does. He makes people trust him." Emily straightened in her chair. That same quiet steel I'd recognized the first time I met her. "What do we do?" "We go to the graduation dinner," I said. "All of us." The dinner was held at the Ashford Estate, a stone house on 12 acres overlooking the valley. 200 guests, white-coated servers circulating with champagne, a string quartet playing something soft and expensive. My son wore the suit I'd bought him with 3 months of overtime pay. Emily wore a blue dress that matched her eyes. I wore the only formal outfit I owned, a black dress I'd bought for James's funeral and altered twice over the years. Dr. Richard Ashford greeted us at the door. He was tall, silver-haired, the kind of man who fills a room with his presence the way a storm fills a sky. His handshake was firm and his smile was practiced, and his eyes looked right through me. "Mrs. Dawson. How lovely to finally meet the woman who raised such an impressive young man." He leaned closer. "On a nurse's salary, no less." "Remarkable." I smiled. "Thank you, Dr. Ashford." We sat down to dinner. I was placed near the back of the room, far from the main table where my son and Emily sat with her family. I didn't complain. I'd expected it. The seating arrangement told me everything I needed to know about how Richard Ashford saw me. Dinner was filet mignon and roasted asparagus and some kind of potato gratin that probably cost more per plate than I spent on groceries in a week. I ate slowly and watched. After the main course, Dr. Ashford stood. He tapped his glass. The room went silent. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight to celebrate a remarkable young man." He nodded toward my son. "When my daughter brought him home, I'll admit I had reservations. Medical school is demanding enough without the added pressure of financial hardship." Someone at a nearby table shifted uncomfortably. But he proved me wrong. He worked harder than anyone in his class, and I believe that drive comes from understanding what it means to go without. To grow up in circumstances that most people in this room, frankly, cannot imagine. He paused, letting the words settle. "So tonight, I raise my glass to my new son-in-law, and I want him to know that from this day forward, he has the resources, the connections, and the family name to finally give his mother the life she deserved, because God knows she's earned it." He turned to me across the room. That practiced smile, those empty eyes. "To Maggie, for doing her best." Polite applause scattered through the room. A few guests lifted their glasses. Most looked uncomfortable. My son's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping from 30 feet away. I stood. The chair scraped against the marble floor. "Dr. Ashford," I said, my voice carrying through the silence, "thank you for those generous words." He nodded, still smiling, already starting to sit down. "But before we move on, I think everyone here should know what kind of resources and connections you're really offering." His smile froze. My son stood beside Emily. They both looked at me. My son nodded once. 26 years ago, my husband James Dawson was a paramedic. He died responding to a gas leak at Whitfield Memorial Hospital. The official report said it was unavoidable deterioration. But 6 months before that leak, an inspection flagged the basement infrastructure as critical. It needed immediate repair. The estimated cost was $420,000. I reached into my purse and held up the cracked wristwatch. Someone in this room decided that $420,000 was too much to spend on keeping people alive. Someone wrote, "Defer to next fiscal year" on that report and signed his name. My husband went into that building trusting that it was safe. He carried 2 men out on his back. Then he went back in because he was told there might be a third. There wasn't. The corridor collapsed. He was 31 years old, and I was 5 months pregnant. The room was perfectly still. Not a glass clinked. Not a chair moved. I thought maybe it was a one-time failure, I continued. A terrible mistake. But it wasn't. Emily stepped forward. She was shaking, but her voice was clear. 18 months ago, a patient named Dorothy Chen died during a routine knee replacement at Whitfield Memorial. She addressed the room directly. The anesthesia monitoring equipment in Operating Room 3 had been flagged as malfunctioning. Staff reported it. A replacement was scheduled, then canceled. My father authorized that cancellation. She held up her phone, displaying the photograph, the equipment log from OR3, the malfunction warning, the override authorization. Dorothy Chen was a grandmother, Emily said. She trusted our hospital to keep her safe. We failed her because saving money was more important than saving her life. Dr. Ashford's face had gone from red to white. He gripped the edge of the table. This is outrageous. This is a family celebration, not a courtroom. My son spoke then, calm and steady, his father's voice coming through a generation later. You're right, it's not a courtroom. But there will be one. He looked at his father-in-law. I contacted the state medical board last week. Linda Voss has provided her full testimony. The county prosecutor has the inspection records from both incidents, the one that killed my father and the one that killed Dorothy Chen. A full investigation into Whitfield Memorial's safety record begins Monday. Murmurs erupted through the room. Guests turned to each other. Someone at the back stood up and walked out, then another. Dr. Ashford lunged forward, pointing at me. You did this. You poisoned my daughter against me. You're a night shift nurse from nowhere, and you think you can destroy everything I've built. I looked at him across the room. This man who had haunted my life for 26 years, who had taken my husband from me and then stood at a podium and thanked God that my son had finally escaped my poverty. I didn't destroy anything, Dr. Ashford, I said quietly. I just stopped letting you hide it. The room erupted. Voices overlapping, chairs pushing back, phones coming out. Through the chaos, my son crossed the room and wrapped his arms around me. He was crying. I felt his tears on my shoulder, and for the first time in 26 years, I felt the weight of that cracked wristwatch become something other than grief. Emily joined us. She put her hand on my arm and said, I'm sorry, for my father, for what he did to James, for all of it. I held her face in my hands. You are not your father. You never were. The weeks that followed were loud. The state investigation moved fast. Linda Voss testified. Doris Painter, the maintenance worker who'd first brought me the inspection report, came forward publicly. 3 other former Whitfield employees followed. The paper trail was damning. Deferred repairs, falsified safety records, intimidation of whistleblowers. Dr. Ashford was stripped of his medical license within 2 months. Criminal charges for negligent homicide came 3 months after that, 1 count for James, 1 for Dorothy Chen. He posted bail and retreated to the stone house on the hill, alone. His wife had left by then. Most of his friends had stopped returning calls. Emily struggled. I watched her carry the weight of her father's crimes, the way I'd once carried the weight of James's death. Some days she could barely function, but my son held her the way James would have held me through anything. Patient, present, never once blaming her for what she couldn't have known. She came to me one afternoon, 6 months after the dinner, standing on my porch with red eyes and a cardboard box. I cleaned out my childhood bedroom at the house, she said. Found these in his desk. Inside the box were letters, dozens of them, from families of patients who'd complained about conditions at Whitfield over the years. Letters Ashford had intercepted and never responded to, never forwarded, never acknowledged, just filed in a drawer and forgotten. One letter was from a woman named Patricia Chen, Dorothy's daughter. "Dear Dr. Ashford," she'd written, "my mother trusted your hospital. She trusted you. All I want to know is why. Why wasn't the equipment replaced? Why did no one listen when the nurses said something was wrong? I'm not looking for money. I just want someone to tell me the truth." The letter was dated 14 months before the investigation. It had never been opened. Emily and I sat on the porch and read every single letter. We cried. We got angry. And then Emily said something that changed the course of all our lives. "We need to answer these." She didn't mean literally. She meant we needed to build something that made sure no family ever sent a letter like that into silence again. The James Dawson Patient Safety Foundation launched the following spring. Emily ran it. My son served on the board alongside Linda Voss and two of the former Whitfield employees who'd come forward. They partnered with hospitals across Tennessee to establish independent safety review boards, whistleblower protections, and a public reporting system that couldn't be buried in anyone's desk drawer. Patricia Chen came to the opening ceremony. She brought Dorothy's photograph. I took James's watch from my wrist and held it beside the photograph. Two people who deserved better. Two families who'd waited too long for the truth. "The watch still ticks," I told her. "That's the only thing I know for certain about justice. It doesn't come fast, but it comes." She hugged me then, this stranger whose mother had died the same way my husband had because the same man made the same choice twice. Profit over people, convenience over conscience. Last month my grandson was born, 7 pounds, 4 ounces. They named him James. My son placed him in my arms in the hospital room, this tiny, warm weight with dark eyes and impossibly small fingers. Emily watched from the bed, exhausted and glowing. I held him close and whispered, "Your grandfather would have loved you. He was brave and kind, and he never walked past someone who needed help." The baby blinked up at me with those dark eyes, James's eyes. My son put his hand on my shoulder. "We're naming the foundation's new scholarship after Dad," he said. "Full ride for nursing students from rural communities. Emily's idea." I looked at my daughter-in-law, this woman whose father had tried to erase my existence with a champagne toast, who had chosen truth over loyalty and built something beautiful from the wreckage. "Thank you," I said. She smiled. "He would have carried someone out of a burning building for any one of those students. The least we can do is help them get through school. I still work at St. Andrews. Night shift. Not because I have to anymore, but because that's where I'm needed. The patients who can't sleep at 3 in the morning, the ones who are scared, the ones who just need someone to sit with them in the dark. That's my calling. Always has been. I wear the cracked watch every shift. Sometimes a patient will notice it and ask why I wear a broken watch. It's not broken, I tell them. It's proof that some things survive even when everything around them falls apart. People ask me if I regret waiting 26 years, if I should have come forward sooner. Maybe, probably. But I'll tell you what I know for sure. Silence protects no one, not the person keeping quiet, not the people they're trying to shield. Silence only protects the ones doing harm. My son understood that. He didn't hesitate when I told him the truth. He didn't choose comfort over justice or his career over his conscience. He stood up beside me, and his wife stood with him, and together we did what I should have done alone decades ago. If you're holding a truth that scares you, if you're staying quiet because you think it's safer, because you think the powerful cannot be challenged, I need you to hear me. They can, they must, and you don't have to do it alone. Build to last. That's what James used to say about his work. He meant buildings and bridges and the structures that keep people safe. But I think he also meant this, the truth. The kind of foundation that doesn't crack when pressure comes, the kind of love that holds steady when everything else shakes. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from tonight. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply refuse to be silent.